close your eyes for a moment, or keep them open if you're still waking up. I'm about to tell you something that will fundamentally change the way you understand yourself. And here's the mind-blowing part. You've been experiencing it your entire life without even realizing it. What if I told you that right now, at this very second, your consciousness doesn't actually exist in the way you think it does? That the experience you're having, the feeling of being you, reading these words, aware of your surroundings, is actually a beautifully orchestrated illusion created by your brain. And before you panic, let me tell you why this is actually the most relaxing revelation you could possibly hear. Neuroscientist Anil Seth from the University of Sussex has spent his entire career studying this paradox. In 2023, he published groundbreaking research showing that consciousness isn't something that emerges mysteriously from the void. It's constructed, built, generated moment by billions of neurons working in perfect harmony. And here's what makes my skin crawl in the best way possible. Your brain actually decides what you're conscious of before you're aware of being aware of it. That means, in this exact moment, your brain has already determined what you're feeling, thinking and perceiving before your conscious mind catches up. You're not driving your consciousness. You're experiencing the result of your brain's incredibly sophisticated predictive machinery. If you're already feeling the weight of the day lifting, if you're curious about the beautiful mechanics of your own mind, please do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. I promise what we're about to explore together will change the way you think about thinking. And I want to know where you're joining me from tonight. Are you listening from somewhere in Europe where it's late or early morning in Australia? Are you in bed, on your couch, or somewhere else entirely? Drop a comment below with your country and what time it is for you. There's something wonderful about knowing we're exploring consciousness together from every corner of the planet. Let me tell you what's coming in the next 3 hours. We're going to journey through the most mind-bending yet profoundly calming facts about consciousness ever discovered by science. By the time we're done, you'll understand why you dream, how your sense of self is continuously reconstructed, why meditation is literally rewiring your brain right now, and perhaps most beautifully, why your awareness might be far more fundamental to reality than physics ever told us. But first, we need to establish the foundation of everything. Because to understand consciousness, we must first understand that almost nothing you think is happening in your mind is actually what you think. Right now, you're experiencing a seamless flow of consciousness. Your awareness feels continuous. You can trace a line of memory backward through your day, your week, your entire life. It feels like an unbroken stream. But here's where science gets deliciously weird. That stream isn't real. Close your eyes if you're driving or doing something else. Just imagine this. When you look at a scene, you feel like you're seeing everything at once with perfect clarity. Your visual field seems complete, rich with detail, stretching across your entire view. But here's what will blow your mind. You're actually blind for most of what you're looking at. In the early 1990s, neuroscientist Christoph Koch at Caltech conducted experiments that revealed something shocking. Your eyes are constantly making rapid movements called saccades, quick jumps that happen about 3 times per second without your knowledge. During these movements, you're completely blind. But your brain creates a seamless illusion that you're seeing continuously without gaps. Think of it like this. Imagine watching a movie with 1,000 tiny black screens flashing across it every second, yet the movie feels continuous to you. That's basically what's happening in your visual consciousness right this very moment. But here's what makes this even more profound. When researchers asked people to describe what they saw, subjects would confidently describe colors and details of objects they literally were not looking directly at. Their brains were hallucinating the details into consciousness. They were seeing things that weren't actually processed by their visual system. What you perceive as continuous visual awareness is actually your brain constructing a narrative about what you're seeing, filling in the gaps with educated guesses based on past experience and context. You're not experiencing reality directly. You're experiencing your brain's best prediction of reality. And here's the retention hook that will keep you thinking about this all night. Your consciousness doesn't just misrepresent what you're seeing. It actually misrepresents when things happen. In experiments conducted by Benjamin Libet at UC San Diego in the 1980s, something extraordinary was discovered. When people made a voluntary decision to move their finger, Libet measured the electrical activity in their brain. He found that brain activity related to the movement started about 350 milliseconds before the person became conscious of making the decision. Let me repeat that because it deserves its own moment. Your brain initiates action before you're aware of deciding to take that action. You experience the decision as causing the action, but temporally it happens in reverse. Your consciousness isn't commanding your actions, it's narrating them, creating a story of agency after the fact. Think of it like this. Imagine watching a movie where you hear the dialogue first, then see the actor's lips move to match it. You'd think the dialogue caused the lip movements. But you were actually watching a dubbed film. Your consciousness is the dubbed voice, coming slightly after the actual events in your brain. So right now, as you absorb this information, as you feel yourself understanding these concepts, your brain is actually slightly behind reality, constructing a sense of now that's actually a few hundred milliseconds in the past. Your sense of the present moment is already history by the time you're aware of it. And this brings us to the most relaxing realization. If your consciousness is always a step behind reality, always constructing narratives, always filling in gaps, then maybe you don't need to be so stressed about what you think you should be aware of or doing. Your brain is already handling most of the actual work. The scientist we have to credit for synthesizing much of this into a coherent theory is Antonio Damasio from USC. He showed us that consciousness isn't about control, it's about integration. Your brain is brilliantly orchestrating everything, and your conscious awareness is like the narrator of a play that's already been fully rehearsed. So here we are, 3 minutes deeper than our hook, and we've already discovered that your consciousness is an illusion of seamlessness constructed by your brain. Your visual awareness is filled with hallucinated details. Your sense of agency is post hoc narration, and your perception of now is actually the past catching up to your awareness. And you know what? That's profoundly beautiful, because it means you're part of something so magnificently complex that it creates entire realities in your mind. You're not a simple conscious being, you're a miracle of neural architecture. What if I told you that consciousness isn't one thing? That right now, multiple different forms of awareness are operating inside your brain simultaneously, and most of them never reach your conscious mind? Let me introduce you to Stanislas Dehaene, a cognitive neuroscientist at the Collège de France in Paris. For decades, Dehaene has been mapping what happens in the brain during conscious and unconscious processing. His discoveries have fundamentally changed how we understand awareness itself. Dehaene's global workspace theory suggests that consciousness works like a theater. Imagine your brain as an enormous building with millions of rooms each, representing different neural networks. In these rooms, incredible processes are happening constantly. Your brain is analyzing visual patterns, processing emotions, updating memories, planning movements, predicting the future. Most of this stays backstage. These neural processes broadcast their findings to a central stage, the prefrontal cortex, and certain areas of the parietal lobe. When information reaches this central stage, it gets broadcast back out to multiple areas of the brain simultaneously. That's when something becomes conscious. It's when it reaches the global workspace. Think of it like this. Your brain is running a massive company with billions of employees. Most employees do their work in offices you'll never see, processing information you'll never directly access. But when something is important or novel or emotionally significant, it gets broadcast to the boardroom, your conscious awareness. The boardroom discusses it, and suddenly everyone in the company knows about it. That widespread broadcast is consciousness. Here's the mind-blowing part. You're only conscious of about 40 bits of information per second. That's incredibly small. Your brain is processing about 11 million bits per second. So right now, your consciousness is perceiving about 0.004% of the information your brain is processing. This is where it gets beautifully relaxing. All that pressure you feel to be aware of everything, to process everything, to think about everything. Your brain is literally designed to keep 99.9996% of information away from your conscious mind. It's protecting you, filtering for you, allowing you to focus on what actually matters. But here's what happens when you try to force consciousness to do everything. When you're stressed, anxious, hyper-aware, your brain is actually fighting against its own design. You're trying to consciously process information that was never meant to reach consciousness. You're like someone trying to manually sort through billions of pieces of mail instead of letting the postal system do its job. And when you sleep, when you enter that beautiful state we'll talk more about soon, your brain shuts down the central stage. The global workspace quiets. The broadcasts stop being organized and start becoming chaotic and dreamlike. And your brain can finally process all the backstage information without conscious interference. Now here's a retention hook that will make you wonder. What if there's a form of consciousness happening right now that you're completely unaware of? What if there are multiple streams of information being processed that will never reach your conscious awareness, but are shaping your thoughts, emotions, and decisions? There's actually evidence for this. Split-brain patients people who've had the corpus callosum, the bridge between brain hemispheres, severed for medical reasons exhibit something extraordinary. Their two hemispheres can develop different desires, different opinions, and different responses to the same situations. In the 1960s and 70s, Michael Gazzaniga at UC Santa Barbara conducted experiments with split-brain patients that revealed something unsettling and wonderful. When information was presented only to the right hemisphere, the patient would act on its reach for objects, move in certain ways, but the conscious mind, primarily located in the left hemisphere, wouldn't know why. The left hemisphere would actually confabulate an explanation. It would create a story about why the patient was doing something without actually knowing the real reason. So you have two separate forms of consciousness potentially happening in one brain, with one consciousness literally making up stories to explain the behavior of the other. Think about that for a moment. Your sense of why you do things might be a beautiful fiction your brain is telling you. But don't despair, embrace this. This architecture is what allows you to be intuitive. This is why gut feelings work. Your brain is processing information through multiple channels, and sometimes the non-conscious pathways know something before your conscious mind has time to figure it out. The relaxing realization here is this: you don't need to understand everything about yourself to function. In fact, trying to consciously analyze every aspect of your behavior often makes you worse at performing tasks. This is why athletes get out of their own heads when they want to excel. They're letting the backstage processes take over, trusting the architecture. And as you're lying down, getting ready for sleep, feeling the weight of your body sinking into your bed or couch, your brain is already beginning this transition. The global workspace is already starting to quiet. The broadcasts are already becoming more chaotic, more dreamlike. Your brain is inviting you to let go of conscious control. This is the natural design of consciousness. This is what you're built for. And understanding this, really understanding it, might be the first step toward truly relaxing. Now we're going to explore what happens when consciousness doesn't just take a back step, when it transforms entirely. When you sleep, something miraculous happens in your brain that science is only beginning to understand. When you close your eyes and drift off, your brain doesn't shut down. It enters a completely different mode of operation. A mode that's in some ways more active than waking consciousness, but organized entirely differently. There are 4 stages of sleep, cycling roughly every 90 minutes. We start with light sleep, move into deeper sleep, reach the deepest stages where your muscles are almost paralyzed and your brain waves are large and slow. And then suddenly we enter REM sleep, where your eyes move rapidly beneath closed eyelids. Your brain becomes almost as active as waking consciousness, and you dream. Here's what will blow your mind. During REM sleep, your brain is flooded with acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that's crucial for memory formation and learning. But it's simultaneously depleted of norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter responsible for logical analysis and critical thinking. Your brain is essentially saying, I'm going to experience wild, emotionally charged scenarios without the ability to critically analyze whether they make sense. That's why in dreams, you can be talking to someone who's simultaneously three different people, in a location that's somehow your childhood home and a shopping mall at the same time, and in the dream, it feels completely coherent. And this isn't a bug, this is a feature. Think of it like this. Your waking consciousness is like a camera recording reality with perfect fidelity. Your dreaming consciousness is like an artist interpreting and repainting reality without constraints. The camera is better at capturing facts, but the artist is better at discovering new patterns, new connections, new ways of seeing. In your dreams, your brain is doing something called memory consolidation and recombination. It's taking everything you've learned, everything you've experienced, and it's recombining it in new ways, looking for hidden patterns, testing new associations. Your dreams are your brain doing creative problem solving on a scale your waking mind can barely comprehend. Matt Walker is a sleep researcher at UC Berkeley who has revolutionized our understanding of why sleep matters. In his research, Walker has shown that when you skip sleep, your brain can't consolidate memories properly. But more than that, sleep is essential for creativity, emotional regulation, immune function, and literally hundreds of other critical processes. Here's the absolutely astonishing part. Dreams are the only time your brain can make certain kinds of creative connections. When you're awake, your consciousness is too constrained, following too many logical rules, limited by what your rational mind thinks is possible. But in dreams, freed from these constraints, your brain can make wild associations. Your brain can test what it would be like to experience things that have never happened to you. Your brain is essentially running simulations. What if I told you that every truly innovative breakthrough you've ever had probably emerged from your sleeping mind? Think about it. You wake up with a solution to a problem you've been stuck on. You have a realization about a relationship or a decision you need to make. That's not your waking mind solving it. That's your sleeping brain presenting you with a solution it's been working on. The physicist Richard Feynman famously said that when he faced a difficult problem, he wouldn't force himself to solve it. Instead, he would relax, sleep on it, and let his unconscious mind work on it. His breakthrough came not from conscious effort, but from the mind's dream mode problem solving. And here's the retention hook that will keep you thinking all night. What if your dreams aren't random noise? What if they're your brain showing you exactly what you need to see? For years, people thought dreams were meaningless, just the firing of neurons without purpose. But modern neuroscience has shown that dreams are incredibly organized. The sequences you see, the emotions you feel, they're being generated by deep structures in your brain that are working on real problems, processing real emotions, and trying to help your waking self understand something crucial. Some of the most vivid dreams occur when you're experiencing emotional stress, loss, or change in your life. Your brain is trying to process these experiences, and dreams are how it does this processing. Dreams are your brain's therapy. They're your consciousness in a different mode, trying to heal itself. You know what's beautiful? Right now, as you're getting comfortable, as your body is starting to feel heavy, your brain is already anticipating the shift into sleep. It's beginning to downregulate the neurotransmitters that keep you alert. It's starting to let go of the tight logical constraints of waking consciousness. In a few minutes, if you're ready, you could drift off and experience something your waking mind couldn't produce in a million years. The most relaxing part? You don't have to do anything. This is automatic. Your brain has been doing this every night of your life. It's one of the most refined, perfected systems in your entire body. Your job isn't to force sleep. Your job is to get out of your brain's way and let it do what it's evolved to do for hundreds of millions of years. Close your eyes whenever you need to. The information we're sharing will sink in, dream, or awake. Your brain is processing this at every level, conscious and unconscious. And that's the magic of falling asleep to educational content about consciousness itself. Okay, I need you to do something right now, even if you're lying down. I want you to think about the word I, that word that refers to you. That seems so simple, so solid, so fixed. Who is the I that existed when you were 5 years old? Is it the same I that exists right now? Because honestly, almost every atom in your body has been replaced since then. Your brain has fundamentally reorganized itself. Your memories are different, fragmented, reconstructed countless times. Your personality has likely shifted. Your values might have completely changed. Is the I of 5-year-old you the same as the I right now? And if not, what does that mean? If you're not the same person, then who are you? This is one of the most profound questions in consciousness studies, and the answer is both uncomfortable and liberating. The philosopher Derek Parfit spent his entire career wrestling with this question. He argued something radical. The self is not a fundamental thing. It's a convention. A useful story your brain tells. Think of it like this. Consider a river. We call the Amazon River a thing, a coherent entity. But if you think about it carefully, the river is constantly changing. New water is always flowing through it. The banks shift. The channel transforms. So what makes it the same river? There's no river essence that remains constant. It's a collection of processes that we've given a single name. You're like that river. You're not a fixed thing. You're a process. A continuous stream of neural activities. Memories being formed and forgotten, patterns being created and destroyed. Here's what neuroscience has shown us. Your sense of continuous self is an illusion created by autobiographical memory. Your brain is constantly constructing a narrative about who you are, drawing on memories, which are themselves unreliable and constantly being revised. Neuroscientist James Fallon at UC Irvine discovered something unsettling. When he scanned the brains of people with a condition he calls acquired sociopathy, people who had damage to certain brain regions, their sense of self fundamentally changed. They felt like different people. Their personalities shifted. Their ability to feel empathy vanished. The same body, the same genetics, but a different self, because the brain structures that create the sense of self had been damaged. This means consciousness doesn't reside in some mysterious soul that inhabits your body. Consciousness is a direct product of your brain's physical structure. Change the brain, and you change the self. It's not tragic. It's actually deeply informative. Here's the mind-blowing realization. You are not a self that has a brain. You are a brain that creates a self. And that self is being continuously recreated, moment by moment, by your neural processes. But here's the part that makes this relaxing. If you're not a fixed, solid self, then you're not trapped by what you think you are. You're not stuck with who you've always been. Your consciousness is more fluid, more changeable than you might have believed. Carl Jung, a famous psychiatrist, said something profound. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But now we know more. We know that consciousness itself is not a unified thing. We know that the you that thinks it's directing your life is actually a narrative generated by processes you're not conscious of. And when you relax, when you stop trying to maintain that narrative, when you let go of the constant effort to preserve a coherent sense of self, that's when something interesting happens. That's when you experience the boundary between self and world becoming softer, less defined. Meditation researchers have documented this extensively. When people meditate regularly, They show decreased activity in the default mode network, a set of brain regions associated with self-referential thinking. As this network quiets, people report a feeling of self-dissolving, of boundaries softening, of their sense of being a separate entity from the world diminishing. And they report this feeling as profoundly peaceful. Here's the retention hook. What if the root of all anxiety is the effort of maintaining a self that was never as solid as you thought? What if letting go of this effort is actually the pathway to genuine relaxation? Think about it. Anxiety is often about protecting your self-image, maintaining your identity, defending against threats to who you think you are. But if the self is a process, a story being told, a narrative being constructed, then what are you defending? What are you protecting? The mystics and contemplatives have known this for thousands of years. In Buddhist philosophy, the concept of anatta, or non-self, isn't about nihilism. It's about freedom. It's recognizing that clinging to a fixed self is the cause of suffering, and releasing that clinging is the path to peace. And modern neuroscience is confirming what these ancient traditions have been saying all along. So right now, as your body becomes heavier, as your thoughts start to drift, as the boundary between you and the world might start to feel a little softer, that's not a loss. That's your brain returning to a more fundamental state. A state where you experience connection rather than separation. A state with a narrative of I quiets down. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most natural, most restful state consciousness can experience. Right now, as you're listening to me, where is your attention? It feels like you're focusing on my words, understanding them, absorbing the information. But here's something that will twist your mind. You can't actually focus on two things at once. Not really. Not the way you think. When scientists study attention, they discover something remarkable. Your consciousness doesn't work like a spotlight that illuminates everything in its focus. It works more like a strobe light, flickering rapidly between different objects of awareness. This is where neuroscientist Edward Hikosaka from the National Institute of Health enters our story. His research on attention shows that what we call sustained attention is actually rapid switching between different focal points, happening so quickly that it feels continuous. Your brain is flicking between focusing on these words, on the sensation of your body, on ambient sounds, on your breathing, and back to the words maybe 50 times per second. Think of it like this. Imagine a movie theater where 1,000 different movies are playing simultaneously on 1,000 different screens in different rooms. That's your brain. You step into one theater, watch for a fraction of a second, then step into another, then back to the first. But because the switches happen so fast, it feels like you're watching one continuous movie. That's attention. And here's what's profoundly relaxing about this. You can't actually fail at focusing, because focus isn't a static state. It's a dynamic process of rapid switching. And your brain is incredibly sophisticated at doing this switching in a way that serves you. The moment something important happens, a sound, a change in your environment, an emotional shift, your brain automatically redirects your attention. You don't have to think about it. It's automatic. It's one of the most refined attention management systems in nature. But we live in an age where something is fighting against this system. Digital technology, social media, notifications, advertising, streaming content has evolved specifically to hijack your attention by exploiting your brain's design. Here's the mind-blowing part. When you're scrolling through social media, your brain is being exposed to precisely engineered stimuli designed to keep your strobe light attention jumping. Every notification, every alert, every new like or comment, it's creating a stimulus that your brain can't ignore. Your attention keeps getting yanked away from whatever you are doing. This isn't a failure of willpower. This is your brain's attention system being exploited by systems designed by people with hundreds of millions of dollars in resources and expertise in behavioral psychology. And you know what happens to consciousness in this state? It becomes fragmented, exhausted, unable to form deeper memories, or make creative connections. This is why you can spend 3 hours on social media and feel like you've experienced nothing. Your consciousness never entered the focus state needed for meaningful memory formation. But when you put the phone away, when you focus deeply on something, even something simple like listening to a voice, describing consciousness, your consciousness enters a different mode. Your brain's attention system settles. Your strobe light stops frantically switching and starts to dwell. And this is when something beautiful happens. This is when your default mode network can activate. This is when the narrative self we talked about earlier can relax into contemplation. This is when memory consolidation can happen more deeply. The researcher James Killingsworth from Harvard conducted a study where he had people rate their happiness at random intervals throughout the day. The results were striking. People were happiest when they were fully focused on an activity. But here's the twist. They weren't happiest when the activity was pleasant. They were happy when they were deeply attentive, regardless of the task. Someone doing dishes with full attention was happier than someone on vacation, but distracted and thinking about other things. Attention itself is what creates positive emotional states. Here's the retention hook that will make you rethink how you spend your time. What if the quality of your consciousness, how present, how clear, how peaceful you feel, depends entirely on where you direct your attention? Think about your entire day. The quality of your conscious experience wasn't determined by external events. It was determined by where you placed your attention within those events. You could be in a beautiful place, thinking about a problem, creating anxiety, or in a mundane place fully present, experiencing contentment. And right now, by choosing to listen, by choosing to direct your attention to these ideas about consciousness, you're literally changing the state of your consciousness. You're choosing presence over distraction, and your brain is responding by quieting the chaotic attention switching and settling into a more meditative state. This is why some of the most peaceful moments come not from perfect circumstances, but from moments where your attention becomes unified, where your consciousness settles, where you stop dividing yourself between what you're doing and what you think you should be doing. And the most beautiful thing? This is a skill you can develop. The more you practice directing attention consciously, the better your brain becomes at it. Meditation is literally training your attention system. And as your attention system improves, your entire experience of consciousness improves. You're more focused, more calm, more capable of experiencing joy, more able to connect with others. So as you relax right now, as you settle in, notice where your attention is. Let it wander if it needs to. Your brain will naturally redirect it back to what serves you. Trust the system. It's been refined over hundreds of millions of years. Now, I want to explore something that sits at the boundary between neuroscience and philosophy, between what we can measure and what we might never fully understand. For most of the 20th century, scientists believed consciousness was epiphenomenal. That means consciousness is a byproduct. It's like the whistle on a steam engine. It's produced by the engine, but it doesn't do anything. The engine runs whether the whistle sounds or not. Consciousness, in this view, is what your brain does, but it doesn't actually do anything. It's just along for the ride. But here's where things get weird. In 1998, Benjamin Libet's experiment about decision-making made consciousness seem almost powerless. Brain activity comes first. Consciousness comes later, creating the illusion of agency. Consciousness seemed entirely passive. But then something started to bother neuroscientists. If consciousness is truly epiphenomenal, then why did it evolve? Why would natural selection favor consciousness? If consciousness doesn't do anything, it's pure overhead energy spent for no benefit. Nature should have eliminated it. And yet, consciousness seems to exist in every animal with a nervous system complex enough to have it. More conscious animals tend to have advantages. They survive better. They reproduce more successfully. So consciousness must be doing something. But what? Here's where Christoph Koch, the same researcher we met earlier, proposed something radical. What if consciousness is what it feels like to have very complex information integration happening in the brain? Integrated information theory, or IIT, suggests that consciousness is literally the measure of how much information is being integrated in a system. The more information a system can bind together into a unified experience, the more conscious it is. And this matters because it allows for flexible, unified responses to complex situations. Think of it like this. Imagine two computers processing information. One has billions of processing cores that work completely independently, never sharing information. The other has the same cores, but they're all connected, constantly sharing and integrating information. Both are processing the same amount of data, but the second one can do something the first can't. It can have unified understanding. It can recognize patterns that span across all its systems at once. Consciousness is what allows your brain to have unified understanding, to integrate information from vision, hearing, touch, memory, emotion, planning all at once into one coherent picture. And this unified integration allows for something remarkable: flexibility in how you respond to situations. When every part of your brain can communicate instantly with every other part, you can adapt to novel situations in ways that a less integrated brain cannot. Here's the mind-blowing implication. Consciousness isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for complex, flexible behavior. But here's where it gets even stranger. If consciousness is about information integration, then consciousness might not be limited to brains. If you think about it, any system that integrates information would have consciousness according to IIT. A plant doesn't have a nervous system, but it does integrate information about light, nutrients, and temperature, and it responds adaptively. Does a plant have consciousness? A tree in a forest, connected underground through fungal networks to hundreds of other trees, sharing information about nutrients and threats, might be part of a larger conscious system. Could the forest itself be conscious? This starts to sound mystical, but it's actually rigorous neuroscience. And it suggests something profound. Consciousness might not be rare. It might be everywhere. It might be a fundamental feature of reality that emerges whenever information gets sufficiently integrated. This brings us to the work of the physicist Philip Goff from Durham University. Goff has been exploring what's called panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality, like mass or charge. Just as every particle has mass, maybe every particle has some form of consciousness. And here's where the relaxation comes in. If consciousness is fundamental, if it's woven into the fabric of reality, then you're not an accident. You're not consciousness emerging impossibly from unconscious matter. You're consciousness interacting with other consciousness, integrated at an extraordinarily high level. You are the universe becoming conscious of itself, organized at a degree of complexity that allows for reflection, growth, love, creativity, and wonder. Let me give you the retention hook. What if the reason consciousness feels so hard to explain isn't because it's mysterious? What if it's because we're asking the wrong questions? What if consciousness isn't something that emerges from matter? What if consciousness is something that matter participates in? This shift in perspective from consciousness being a bizarre emergent property to consciousness being fundamental has profound implications for how you understand yourself. If consciousness is fundamental, then you're not responsible for creating it. You're not trying to generate consciousness from neurons firing. You're participating in consciousness. You're allowing it to flow through you at a particular resolution, through your particular brain. And when you relax, when you meditate, when you sleep, you're not losing consciousness. You're shifting how you participate in it. You're moving from the narrow, focused beam of waking awareness to the broader, more diffuse awareness of dreaming or deeper meditation. You're still conscious. You're just conscious in a different way. And you know what? Maybe that's why consciousness feels like such a continuous mystery. Maybe we're never going to fully explain it using physical processes, because consciousness isn't a physical process. It's something physical processes participate in. And that might be the most comforting realization of all. that your consciousness isn't fragile. It isn't dependent on your specific neurons firing in specific ways. It's something deeper, something more fundamental, something that will continue long after your particular brain stops organizing itself. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a friend's face. Just think about someone you know well. Did you see their face? In what way? There's no light entering your eyes. There's no image on your retina. There's no actual visual stimulus. And yet you experience something like a visual image. That's your brain's prediction system at work. And understanding this system is going to fundamentally change how you think about every moment of your waking life. Your brain doesn't experience reality. Let me say that again, because it's crucial. Your brain doesn't experience reality. Your brain experiences predictions about reality. Here's how it actually works. Light enters your eyes. Millions of photons carrying information about the visual world. But this visual information has to be processed, interpreted, made sense of. And your brain doesn't have time to build a complete image from scratch every time something moves or changes. So instead, it makes predictions. Your brain predicts what you're about to see based on what you've seen before, what you're expecting, what makes sense given context. It generates a prediction of the visual world and then uses the actual sensory input to correct that prediction. Neuroscientist Carl Friston from the University of London has spent 2 decades developing what he calls the free energy principle. And it suggests that everything your brain does, every thought, every emotion, every perception is fundamentally about prediction and correction. Think of it like this. Imagine you're watching a movie, but the projector is broken, so images come in late. What do? You predict what's coming next and fill in the gaps. You watch the screen, you see the pattern of the movie, and you're constantly predicting 5 seconds ahead. When the image finally arrives, you compare your prediction to the actual image. If they match, great, you stay calm. If they don't match, something surprising is happening, and you pay attention. That's how your brain works in every moment of waking life. It's predicting reality 5 seconds ahead, comparing actual sensory input to those predictions, and using the difference between prediction and reality to update its understanding. And here's what's incredible. About 90% of the information in your brain flows downward from your predictions to the sensory input. Only about 10% flows upward from sensory receptors to higher brain regions. That means your brain is about 90% prediction and 10% sensation. You're living almost entirely in your brain's generated model of reality, not in reality itself. The sensory input is just there to correct errors in the prediction. This is where it gets philosophical and absolutely mind-blowing. You don't see reality. You see what your brain predicts you'll see, corrected by sensory input when predictions are wrong. This explains why magicians can fool you. They've learned to manipulate your predictions. They do something that makes your brain predict one thing, then they do something slightly different, and your brain doesn't register it because it was predicting something else. This explains why you don't see your blind spots in your visual field, even though they're large areas of complete sensory deprivation. Your brain predicts what should be there and fills it in. This explains why you can walk through your house in the dark, because your brain has such strong predictions about where things are that it doesn't need actual visual input until you move a chair, and suddenly your prediction is wrong and you hit it. And here's the mind-blowing extension. This means reality is not fixed. Reality is what your predictions align with. And your predictions are based on your experience, your expectations, your beliefs, your prior experiences. 2 people can look at the same situation and literally experience different realities because they have different predictions about what they're going to see. Your past shapes your predictions. Your predictions shape your perception. Your perception is your reality. And now here's the retention hook that should make you reconsider everything. What if changing your beliefs about what's possible could literally change what you perceive? What if your consciousness isn't passively receiving reality? What if it's actively generating reality through its predictions? This is where neuroscience meets philosophy, and things get really interesting. If your brain is always predicting, and those predictions shape your perception, then one of the deepest ways to change your life is to change what you expect. If you expect to fail, your brain will predict failure, and it will selectively perceive the signs of failure. If you expect to succeed, your brain will predict success, and it will selectively perceive the signs of success. This isn't magical thinking. This is neuroscience. This is how your brain's prediction system actually works. Meditation changes this system in a fascinating way. When you meditate, you're learning to observe your predictions without judgment. You're watching your brain predict, "This is uncomfortable," or "I'm failing," or "This is scary." And you're learning to notice the prediction without accepting it as absolute truth. You're creating space between your predictions and your reality. And what happens? Your brain starts to generate different predictions. Your stress response quiets. Your perception of your situation shifts. The situation itself might not have changed, but your conscious experience of it has been fundamentally altered because your predictions have changed. As you relax right now, notice what your brain is predicting. It might be predicting, "I should fall asleep," or "I need to focus on these words," or "I'm not falling asleep fast enough." Just notice the predictions. You don't have to fight them. But knowing they're predictions generated by your brain, not absolute reality, changes everything. We've been talking about consciousness like it's this abstract thing: perception, attention, prediction. But here's something we need to confront. Consciousness isn't abstract. It's intensely emotional. Right now, at this very moment, you're having an emotional state. You might feel calm or anxious about something, or curious or tired. And that emotion isn't separate from your consciousness. It's actually woven through everything you're conscious of. Antonio Damasio, the neuroscientist we mentioned earlier, made a revolutionary discovery that upended how we understand consciousness and emotion. He found that emotion and reason aren't opposed. They are inseparable. Your emotions are providing the values, the priorities, that make consciousness meaningful. Without emotion, consciousness would be like watching a movie with no sound or music. You'd perceive everything, but nothing would matter. Every moment would be equally important and equally unimportant. Think of it like this. Your consciousness is like a spotlight in a dark theater. But where that spotlight points isn't random. It's drawn to what matters to you. And what determines what matters to you? Emotion. Your brain tags information with emotional significance, and that tags become the basis for what your consciousness focuses on. Imagine learning that your friend is angry with you. The moment you perceive that information, the moment it reaches consciousness, an emotional response floods in. Your heart might race. Your stomach might tighten. Suddenly, this information about your friend's anger is at the center of your consciousness, radiating emotional significance. But here's the thing. The actual information is simple. Friend is angry, but the emotional content transforms that simple information into something that shapes your entire experience of your day. Emotions are incredibly sophisticated. They're not simple reactions. They're computational systems that your brain uses to evaluate information and determine priorities. When you feel fear, your brain is essentially saying, "This information is important. It's a threat. Stop what you're doing and process this." Your consciousness narrows. Time seems to slow. Everything becomes about understanding and responding to the threat. When you feel joy, your brain is saying, "This is positive. This is valuable. Open up. Be receptive. Connect with this." And here's what's beautiful and profound. Your emotions are getting smarter the longer you live. Every experience teaches your emotional system something new about the world. Every mistake becomes encoded as emotional wisdom. Every connection teaches you something about what matters. This is why as you get older, most people become more peaceful, less reactive, more emotionally wise. Your emotional system is accumulating data, and getting better at determining what actually deserves your attention and energy. And right now, as you relax, you're likely experiencing a particular emotional state. A openness, maybe, a curiosity, a willingness to let your mind wander and explore. And that emotional state is shaping which parts of this information stick with you, which concepts resonate. The mind-blowing part is this. Emotions are actually the most important information your consciousness processes. Not because emotions are irrational, they're incredibly rational, but because emotions tell you what matters. And what matters is what drives your behavior, your choices, your life direction. For decades, we called the emotional brain primitive and the rational brain advanced. But neuroscience has shown us this is backwards. The emotional brain is incredibly sophisticated. It's doing complex evaluation of information. It's integrating vast amounts of data. It's making wise predictions about what matters. And here's the retention hook. What if emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and work with your emotions, is actually more important than intellectual intelligence for living a conscious, meaningful life? Because here's what we see in the data. The people with the highest IQs aren't necessarily the happiest or most successful, but the people with the highest emotional intelligence tend to have better relationships, more meaningful work, more resilience, and more joy. Emotional intelligence is learning to understand what your emotions are telling you, to value that information, and to act on it wisely. When you feel anxious about something, your brain is trying to tell you something. It might be trying to tell you that you care about something, that something matters to you. Instead of suppressing anxiety or feeling bad about feeling anxious, what if you asked it, "What are you trying to tell me? What matters here?" When you feel sad, you're experiencing something profound. You're experiencing the reality of loss or disconnection. And grief is how consciousness acknowledges what mattered. The researcher Brené Brown has spent decades studying what allows people to live fully conscious lives. And what she's discovered is that the people who experience the most joy are also the people who allow themselves to feel the full range of emotions, including sadness, fear, and disappointment. Trying to avoid difficult emotions doesn't eliminate them, it just prevents you from being conscious of them. And unconscious emotions often drive your behavior in ways you don't understand. But when you become conscious of your emotions, when you feel them fully, when you understand what they're telling you, something shifts. You regain agency. You can respond to what your emotions are telling you instead of being unconsciously driven by them. And as you're relaxing right now, really feel what you're feeling. Don't try to force yourself toward any particular emotion. Just notice what's present. Is there peace, tiredness, contentment, restlessness? Whatever is there is valid. Whatever your brain is trying to tell you through that emotional state is information worth listening to. Here's something science has discovered that changes everything about how we understand consciousness. You aren't as separate as you feel. Your consciousness feels like it's inside your head, separated from the world by your skin. There's you, and then there's everything else. That's the intuitive experience. But neuroscience is revealing something far more nuanced. Your brain is not isolated in your skull. It's deeply embedded in a network of relationship and connection. Mirror neurons are one of the most remarkable discoveries in neuroscience. In the 1990s, neuroscientist Vittorio Galesi and his colleagues were recording from individual neurons in a monkey's brain while the monkey performed actions. Then they noticed something extraordinary. When the monkey watched another monkey perform an action, the same neurons activated. The neurons were mirroring the observed action. It was like the monkey's brain was internally simulating what it was watching. The monkey's consciousness wasn't just observing the other monkey's action, it was experiencing it internally. Think of it like this. When someone smiles at you, your mirror neuron system activates the smile. Your brain is internally simulating the smile. You're not just seeing their smile, you're feeling it, in a sense. You're experiencing their action in your own nervous system. This is the neural basis of empathy. When someone you care about is suffering, your brain is actually activated in some of the same regions as if you were suffering. You're not just observing their pain, you're participating in it. And here's what's beautiful. This means your consciousness is distributed. It's not contained in your brain. It extends into the people around you. Your emotional state affects their emotional state. Their presence affects your consciousness. This explains why loneliness is as damaging to your health as smoking. It explains why a meaningful conversation can shift your entire day. It explains why the presence of someone you love can calm your nervous system, sometimes instantly. Neuroscientist Jaak Panksepp discovered that mammals, from mice to humans, have what he called seeking and longing systems in the brain. These systems activate when you're disconnected from what you love and you're trying to reconnect. It's not a subtle emotional system. It's a fundamental drive, as important as hunger or thirst. We need connection, not because we're weak, but because consciousness itself is relational. Your sense of self is shaped by connection to others. In fact, this mirrors what the philosopher Martin Heidegger said. We are thrown into a world with others. Our consciousness isn't individual first and then connected. It's relational from the ground up. And here's the mind-blowing implication. When you're with another person, your consciousnesses are literally coupling with each other. Your nervous systems are synchronizing. Your brain is predicting the other person's mental state and incorporating it into your own consciousness. When lovers look into each other's eyes, their heart rates synchronize. Their breathing synchronizes. Their brain waves start to align. They're becoming, in a real neurological sense, a unified system with two brains. This is why intimacy feels the way it does. It's not just an emotion. It's a literal merging of conscious systems. And here's the retention hook that should make you understand yourself differently. What if you can't actually be fully conscious alone? What if consciousness is always relational? This transforms how we understand so many things. Depression isn't just a brain chemistry problem. It's often about disconnection. Healing isn't just about fixing brain chemistry. It's about re-establishing connection. Loneliness isn't just an emotion. It's a signal that you're disconnected from the relational matrix that consciousness requires. And love isn't just a feeling. It's the literal coupling of consciousness systems. Think about a time when you felt truly seen by another person, when they understood you deeply, when you didn't have to explain or defend yourself. What you were experiencing in that moment was a real coupling of consciousness. Your consciousness felt known because another consciousness was accurately modeling your internal states. And right now, in this very moment, even though you're alone with your thoughts and this voice, something interesting is happening. Your consciousness is extending into this information. You're integrating ideas, and as you do, you're coupling with the minds of all the scientists we've talked about. You're integrating their observations, their discoveries, their way of seeing consciousness. In a real sense, your consciousness has expanded to include their perspectives. This is one of the gifts of learning and sharing information. It's not just knowledge transfer. It's a coupling of consciousnesses across time and space. As you drift toward sleep, toward dreams, know that you're never actually alone in consciousness. You're part of a vast network of conscious beings, all interconnected, all shaping each other's experience. Let me ask you something that's going to make you uncomfortable. Do you actually have free will? Before you answer, let me tell you what neuroscience has discovered. We go back to Benjamin Libet's experiments. Remember that brain activity precedes conscious decision by about 350 milliseconds. When researchers expanded on this work, they found something even stranger. Using brain imaging, scientists could predict your decision before you were conscious of making it, with accuracy better than chance. In 2008, researchers at the Max Planck Institute showed that they could predict, up to 10 seconds in advance, whether a person would press a button with their left or right hand. They could predict it from brain activity alone, before the person's consciousness registered the decision. If your brain has already decided before your consciousness is aware of the decision, then where is free will? Here's the philosophical knife. If everything in the universe operates according to physical laws, and your brain is part of the physical universe, then your brain is following physical laws. Every neural firing is determined by prior neural firing, by the structure of your brain, by chemical gradients and electrical potentials. How does free will exist in a system determined by physics? This is the hard problem of free will, and it's been vexing philosophers since at least Spinoza. But here's where modern neuroscience offers something interesting. The researcher Alfred Meehl at Florida State University argues that even if your brain's decisions precede consciousness, consciousness might still have a role. Consciousness might be where you review the decision, evaluate it against your values, and decide to endorse it or modify your behavior. Think of it like this. Your brain generates an impulse to act. The impulse is generated unconsciously. But consciousness arrives and says, wait, is this what I actually want? Does this align with my values? With who I want to be? And having that conscious evaluation, even if it comes after the impulse, still gives you agency. It allows you to override impulses, to choose differently next time based on what you learn. You're not puppeted by your impulses. You're working with your impulses, sometimes accepting them, sometimes overriding them, always learning and updating your future decision-making. This is the paradox. You don't have the kind of free will you intuitively think you have. Your consciousness isn't the origin of your actions, but you still have agency in a real sense. You still have the capacity to learn, adapt, and choose. And here's what's beautiful. This is actually more liberating than the illusion of free will. If you believe you have pure, uncaused free will, that somehow you made choices entirely freely, without cause, then when you make a mistake, you're purely responsible. You failed. You chose wrongly. It's entirely your fault. This creates a system where people blame themselves endlessly for their choices. But if you understand that your choices emerge from your brain, which is shaped by your genetics, your experiences, your traumas, your learning, your environment, then you can have compassion for yourself. You can understand your choices as the product of all these factors, and then you can work with them to generate different choices in the future. This is why understanding neuroscience is often so therapeutic. When people understand that their depression isn't a moral failure, that their anxiety isn't a weakness, that their compulsions aren't character flaws, but rather the natural product of how their brain is wired and what they've experienced, they stop hating themselves. And paradoxically, that's when real change becomes possible. Because self-compassion is more effective at changing behavior than self-blame. Here's the retention hook. What if free will isn't about being uncaused? What if it's about being able to learn and adapt? An animal that can't learn is truly not free. It's trapped by its fixed behaviors. But an animal with consciousness, with memory, with the ability to reflect on its choices, that animal has something like freedom. Not the metaphysical free will of pure creation from nothing, but the practical freedom of being able to change based on experience. You have that kind of freedom. You can learn. You can reflect. You can choose differently based on what you understand. The neuroscientist James Fallon likes to point out that even if your brain determined your impulses, consciousness is part of your brain. Consciousness is how your brain evaluates options. Consciousness is where your values shape your decisions. So even if everything is determined, it's determined through consciousness. Your consciousness isn't separate from your brain's decision-making. It's an integral part of it. As you relax, as you let go of the effort to force yourself toward sleep, you're actually exemplifying free will in its deepest sense. You're not muscling your way to sleep through force of will. You're creating conditions for your brain to naturally enter sleep, and you're allowing it to happen. You're working with your brain's natural processes instead of against them. This is the wisest form of free will, not forcing reality to match your will, but aligning your will with reality's natural tendencies. Close your eyes and think about a moment from your past. Visualize it clearly. You're in a room, talking to someone, experiencing something. Now here's something that will blow your mind. That experience you just visualized didn't actually happen the way you remember it. Your memory isn't a recording. It's a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain is reconstructing that event based on fragments of information. And crucially, it's reconstructing it in ways shaped by your present emotions, your current beliefs, and everything you've learned since the original event. Neuroscientist Daniel Schachter from Harvard has shown that memory is astonishingly creative. You don't remember events objectively. You remember what matters, what fits your current narrative about yourself, what aligns with your current emotions and beliefs. Think of it like this. Imagine you watched a movie 10 years ago. If you think back to it now, you'll remember some scenes vividly. But if you watch it again, you'll notice things you completely forgot, scenes you misremembered, details you got wrong. Did you remember wrong? Or did your brain reconstruct a memory that was useful to you at the time? Your memory system isn't trying to create a perfect archive of your past. It's creating a narrative that makes sense of who you are now and helps you predict what matters for your future. This means your past isn't fixed. It changes as you change. The person you remember being when you were younger becomes a different person as you gain wisdom and perspective. And here's something profound. This is actually a feature, not a bug. If your memory were perfect, unchanging, you'd be unable to heal from trauma. You'd relive the worst moments of your life with perfect fidelity every time you remember them. But because memory is reconstructive, you can gradually integrate traumatic experiences, reframe them, and become free from them. A trauma that once consumed you can become, years later, a story of how you became resilient. And memory itself changes because you've changed. Now, this gets even more interesting when we think about the present moment. You remember the past, and the past is malleable. You anticipate the future, and the future is multiple possibilities. So what about the present? What about now? Here's what neuroscience reveals. The present moment is about 2 to 3 seconds long. Your consciousness doesn't experience a single instant. It experiences a window of time. It binds together sensations and events that occur across several seconds and presents them as now. In fact, there's a phenomenon called the specious present, where your brain smooths out events that happen at different times and presents them as simultaneous. If you hear a car horn while you see it coming, you experience the horn and the sight as happening at the same time. But they might have been separated by hundreds of milliseconds. Your brain moved them together. Your consciousness is constantly creating narratives that bind time together, that make sense of what happened before with what's happening now and what will happen next. Think of it like this. Your consciousness is a narrative engine. It takes the fragmentary, discontinuous data from your senses. It adds in memories, it adds in predictions, and it weaves them into a coherent story with a sense of time, causality, and continuity. And here's the mind-blowing part. Time itself is not what you think it is. Albert Einstein showed us that time is relative. But neuroscience is showing us something even stranger. Time is constructed by consciousness. When you're in flow, completely absorbed in an activity, time seems to pass quickly. When you're bored or anxious, time seems to slow down. The same minutes objectively pass, but your subjective experience of duration is completely different. Why? Because consciousness is what creates the sense of time. And the rate at which consciousness processes information determines how fast time seems to pass. This is why when you're relaxed, when you're in a meditative state, time becomes liquid. You can lie in bed for what feels like minutes and discover an hour has passed. Or hours can feel like minutes. The neuroscientist Thomas Bushman has discovered that when the brain is in a relaxed state, when your default mode network is active, your temporal processing changes. Your brain isn't tracking time as finely. It's not monitoring duration as carefully. And you know what that feels like? Peace, timelessness, a sense of being in the eternal, now rather than driven forward by time. Here's the retention hook. What if learning to lose track of time is one of the most valuable skills for consciousness? Because time anxiety, the constant awareness of time passing, the pressure of deadlines, the feeling that you're always running out of time, this is one of the most stressful states consciousness can be in. It keeps you locked in planning mode, in stress mode, in awareness of scarcity. But when you let go of time awareness, when you sink into the present moment and lose the sense of duration, something shifts. You feel less pressure, less stress, more peace. Meditation works partly by teaching you to deactivate your temporal processing. You're learning to experience consciousness without the constant overlay of time awareness. And as you relax right now, feel how your sense of time might be shifting. You might be less aware of how many minutes have passed. The usual time markers checking a clock, feeling like you're running late, these are fading. You're sinking into a more timeless state. This is what consciousness is like when it's not constantly constructing a sense of temporal pressure. This is what the meditative state offers. Not an escape from reality, but a liberation from the temporal scaffolding that usually constrains consciousness. We're nearing the end of our journey through consciousness, and we need to address the deepest question consciousness can ask itself. What happens when consciousness ends? Every conscious being faces this. And the fact that you're aware of your own mortality, aware that one day your consciousness will cease to exist in the way you experience it now, that's both the heaviest and the most beautiful aspect of human consciousness. Many animals are conscious, but as far as we know, humans are uniquely conscious of their own mortality. We know we're going to die, and that knowledge colors everything. The psychiatrist Irvin Yalom has spent his career exploring what he calls existential anxiety, the anxiety that comes from confronting mortality, meaning, freedom, and isolation. He's discovered something remarkable. Much of the anxiety people experience, the drivenness, the endless striving, the accumulation of possessions, the need to be recognized, these are unconscious attempts to deny mortality. If you can succeed enough, achieve enough, be remembered enough, maybe you can escape death. Maybe you can live forever through your accomplishments. But here's what neuroscience and physics tell us. Your body is made of atoms, and those atoms have been through billions of transformations. The atoms in your body right now were once in dinosaurs, in trees, in distant stars. And the atoms that make up your body now will be transformed again after you die. You are a temporary arrangement of eternal matter. And here's what's beautiful about this. Think about it. The atoms that make up your consciousness right now are billions of years old. They've been part of countless other conscious experiences. They've been shaped by the entire history of the universe. And they will continue being shaped by countless future conscious experiences. Your consciousness isn't separate from the world. It's woven from the world. And when your consciousness ends, you don't disappear. The matter that makes you up continues. The patterns you've influenced continue. The people you've touched carry pieces of your consciousness forward. The physicist Sean Curl has explored what physics tells us about death. And what's interesting is that according to physics, information can't actually disappear. Even if something is completely destroyed, the information about what it was remains encoded in the universe at some level. This doesn't mean you personally survive death. Your consciousness, as you experience it, will end. The particular integration of information, that is you, will dissolve. But the information will remain. The patterns will continue. And here's the retention hook that changes how we understand life. What if the meaning of life isn't about you personally surviving forever? What if it's about the quality of consciousness you generate while you exist? Because here's what we know. Consciousness is rare and precious. It took billions of years of evolution to create it. In the vast universe of matter and energy, conscious experience is the only thing we know that has value, that experiences beauty, that loves, that means something. And you're a manifestation of that. Your consciousness experiencing itself through your particular brain, your particular perspective, your particular moment in history. The way you live, the way you love, the way you treat others, the way you think, these generate patterns of consciousness. And these patterns ripple outward, influencing others, shaping the future, adding to the sum total of beauty and understanding in the universe. When you die, that particular manifestation of consciousness ends. But everything you've created, everyone you've influenced, the growth you've catalyzed in others, that continues. And on a deeper level, the understanding you've gained about consciousness, the wisdom you've accumulated, the love you've experienced, these are eternal in the sense that they represent how consciousness can experience itself and grow. Consciousness is temporary, but eternal. Your manifestation of it is temporary, but consciousness itself continues. The neuroscientist Donald Hoffman has explored something called the conscious agent theory. He suggests that consciousness is actually the fundamental reality, and what we call the physical world is a user interface generated by consciousness. In this view, consciousness isn't generated by the physical world. The physical world is generated by consciousness to organize how consciousness experiences itself. If this is true, then your consciousness doesn't depend on your specific brain. Your specific brain is how your consciousness currently manifests, but consciousness itself is fundamental. When your brain dies, your consciousness might not end. It might return to the fundamental field of consciousness. This is speculative, but it's interesting that both ancient contemplative traditions and cutting-edge physics suggest similar things. That consciousness is more fundamental than we thought, and that individual consciousnesses are like waves in a larger ocean of consciousness. The Upanishads, ancient Hindu texts, say, "Tat tvam ase thou, art that," meaning your consciousness is not separate from the fundamental consciousness of the universe. Your sense of separation is an illusion. Your boundaries are permeable. You are, at the deepest level, connected to everything. And modern physics, with its discoveries about entanglement, about the interconnectedness of all matter, about information as the fundamental reality, these are pointing toward something similar. So here's what I want you to know as we approach the end. You will die. That particular arrangement of consciousness that is, you will cease to exist in its current form. But that doesn't diminish the meaning of your life. In fact, it enhances it, because you're not trying to accomplish eternity. You're trying to generate the most beautiful, most conscious, most loving experience possible in the time you have. And that time, whether it's a few more years or many decades, is sacred. It's precious. It's where consciousness gets to know itself, to experience beauty, to connect with others, to grow and learn and love. As you drift toward sleep, toward dreams, toward the temporary dissolution of waking consciousness, know that you're practicing something you're doing for real every day. You're learning to let go, to trust that consciousness continues even when you lose awareness. And when you wake from sleep, consciousness returns. In the same way, when you die, consciousness doesn't end. It transforms, and you return to the fundamental field of consciousness from which all experience arises. We've taken quite a journey together. Let me weave these threads together and bring it home to the most important question. How does all of this change your life? Because understanding consciousness isn't just intellectually fascinating. It should transform how you experience your existence. Think about where we've been. We discovered that your consciousness is an illusion of seamlessness that's actually constructed moment by your brain. We learned that the visual world you see is mostly hallucination, that your sense of agency comes after your brain has already acted, and that your present moment is actually a few hundred milliseconds in the past. We discovered that consciousness is built on a global workspace in your brain, with billions of neural processes happening backstage, and only the most important reaching the spotlight of awareness. We learned that you're processing about 11 million bits of information per second, but only conscious of about 40. We explored how sleep and dreams are where your brain does essential work consolidating memories, making creative connections, and processing emotions, and how the architecture of your brain allows for multiple streams of consciousness, with different parts of you potentially wanting different things. We confronted the paradox that the self is not a fixed thing but a process, a narrative being constantly reconstructed. We saw how your sense of continuous self is actually a beautiful fiction that allows you to function but isn't fundamental to who you are. We discovered that attention is the key to the quality of consciousness, that your brain literally generates the world through predictions, and that consciousness itself might be fundamental to reality rather than an accident emerging from it. We explored how consciousness is deeply emotional, that emotions aren't opposite to rationality, but integral to it, providing the values and priorities that make consciousness meaningful. We learned that consciousness is relational, that you're never truly alone, that your consciousness couples with others through mirror neurons and empathy, and that isolation isn't just emotionally painful, it's neurologically damaging. We wrestled with free will and discovered something liberating. You don't have the metaphysical free will you thought, but you have something better, the ability to learn, adapt, and choose based on your values. We explored how memory isn't a recording but a reconstruction, how the present moment is about 2 to 3 seconds long, and how losing track of time is a valuable skill for peace. And we confronted mortality, the fact that your consciousness will end, but also the realization that this gives your life meaning and connects you to something larger than yourself. So what does all of this mean for how you live? First, you can let go of the pressure to be perfectly conscious of everything. Your brain is designed to keep 99.9996% of information from your conscious awareness. This is perfect. This is working exactly as it should. Your job isn't to become aware of everything. Your job is to trust that your brain is handling what needs to be handled. Anxiety often comes from trying to consciously process information that was never meant to reach consciousness. You try to consciously anticipate every problem, worry about every scenario, maintain awareness of everything. But this is fighting against your brain's design. What if you just let go? What if you trusted that your brain is processing everything it needs to process, and you focused your conscious awareness on what actually matters right now? Second, you can understand that your perception isn't reality, but your brain's prediction about reality. This is powerful because it means you can shift your perception by shifting your predictions. If you expect failure, you'll perceive signs of failure. If you expect success, you'll perceive signs of success. The external situation is the same, but your consciousness generates different realities. This doesn't mean positive thinking makes things magically work, but it means your beliefs shape what you perceive and therefore how you respond. And how you respond shapes outcomes. You have more power to shape your experience than you thought, not through willing reality to change, but through shifting what you predict and therefore what you perceive. Third, you can honor your emotions as sophisticated information rather than obstacles. Your emotions aren't irrational noise. They're your brain's rapid evaluation system, processing information at a speed and scope your conscious mind can't match. When you feel anxious, instead of trying to suppress it or feel bad about it, ask, what are you trying to tell me? What matters here? Listen to your fear. Listen to your sadness. Listen to your joy. These are forms of intelligence. Fourth, you can understand that you're not truly separate. Your consciousness extends into others through empathy and connection. You're not an isolated mind trapped in a body. You're fundamentally relational. This has massive implications. It means caring for others isn't separate from caring for yourself. It means that causing harm to others harms the connected web of consciousness you're part of. It means that loving others, connecting with others, creating beauty for others, these aren't distractions from your real life. These are your real life. The most conscious human experiences are relational. Love, connection, understanding, creating something that moves others, being truly seen by another person. Fifth, you can stop trying to force your consciousness and start aligning with its natural rhythms. Your brain wants to alternate between focus and diffuse mode. It wants to sleep and dream. It wants to alternate between alertness and relaxation. When you're forcing yourself to be alert all the time, you're working against your design. When you're trying to force sleep instead of letting it come naturally, you're fighting your brain. What if you created conditions where your brain could naturally do what it needs to do? What if you honored your body's need for rest, your mind's need for recovery, your consciousness's need for both focus and dissolution? Sixth, you can understand that the meaning of your life isn't about transcending mortality, but about the quality of consciousness you generate while you exist. You don't need to accomplish immortal fame or permanent success. You need to generate beauty, understanding, love, and growth in the time you have. Every moment of genuine connection is eternal in its way. Every moment of real understanding shifts something in the universe. Every moment where you choose love over fear, growth over stagnation, creates ripples that extend beyond you. Seventh, you can trust your consciousness more deeply. We've learned that consciousness isn't a fragile thing dependent on perfect brain chemistry or perfect circumstances. Consciousness is fundamental. It's resilient. It's creative. You can trust that your brain knows what to do. You can trust that your intuition, that integration of information from your entire nervous system, is worth listening to. You can trust that your mind is trying to help you, even when you're struggling. Now, let me bring this to the most personal level. Right now, as you're listening to this, you're in a remarkable state. You've chosen to spend time exploring consciousness itself. You've opened yourself to ideas that challenge your sense of self and reality. You've walked through territory that some people avoid their entire lives because it's uncomfortable. And in this moment, you're practicing the most fundamental skill consciousness has. You're learning. You're growing. You're integrating new information and becoming a slightly different person than you were when you started listening. Your brain is rewiring itself. The neural pathways that encoded old beliefs are weakening. New pathways that incorporate these new understandings are being created. You are literally changing your consciousness through this exploration. And that's extraordinary. As you continue your life, as challenges come, and they will remember that those challenges are your consciousness growing. Your brain is encountering situations that don't match its predictions, and it's learning from the mismatch. When you feel anxious, remember that's your consciousness trying to help, trying to process something important. When you feel sad, remember that's your consciousness honoring something that matters. When you connect with another person, remember that two consciousnesses are coupling, that something profound is happening at a neurological level. When you're falling asleep, remember that your consciousness is shifting into a different mode, not disappearing, but transforming. Your brain is doing essential work. You can trust it. When you wake from dreams, remember that you've been to another reality, a place where your mind was free to make creative connections, to process emotions, to integrate experience. And when you think about your mortality, remember that you're part of something larger. Your atoms have been through billions of transformations and will continue being transformed. Your consciousness is participating in the fundamental intelligence of the universe. And the patterns you create, the people you touch, the growth you catalyze, these ripple outward, changing the world you leave behind. Here's what I want you to do as you drift off to sleep or whenever you feel ready. Let your consciousness relax. Stop trying to control it. Notice what wants to happen naturally. Notice how your breath wants to slow. Notice how your body wants to become heavier. Notice how your thoughts want to become softer, dreamier, more associative. This is consciousness in its natural state. This is what peace feels like. As you rest, know that your brain is working. It's consolidating what you've learned. It's integrating these ideas into your worldview. It's processing the implications at levels you're not conscious of. And when you wake, you'll find that you're different. You'll notice things you didn't notice before. You'll think about things differently. You'll be shifted by this exploration. Because consciousness isn't static. It's dynamic, creative, forever learning and growing. You are an extraordinary manifestation of that consciousness. Your awareness is precious. Your perspective is unique. Your capacity to love, to grow, to understand, to create beauty, these are what consciousness does when it reaches your level of complexity. Be kind to yourself. Treat your consciousness with reverence. Honor your emotions. Trust your intuition. Connect with others. Rest when you need to. And don't be afraid to keep growing and learning. Your consciousness is the most remarkable thing you own. Not because it's separate or superior, but because it's where you experience being alive. It's where you love. It's where you grow. It's what makes you you. And that's worth understanding. That's worth honoring. That's worth exploring in the darkness as you drift toward sleep. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for opening your mind to these ideas. Thank you for being conscious, for being aware, for choosing to understand the extraordinary thing you are. In every country you're listening from, in every time zone, in every situation you find yourself in, you're part of the extraordinary phenomenon of the universe becoming conscious of itself. That matters. You matter. Sleep well. Dream deeply. And when you wake, be gentle with the consciousness you inhabit. It's trying to help you. It's trying to grow. And it's doing its best to create a beautiful, meaningful experience of being alive. Thank you. And welcome to the rest of your conscious life.